Every city and every town has its own treasures. The irony about it is that many of us people, we don't know about it. Look at here, Main Street, East Cordova. What do we Vancouver people picture in this location? Well, you may be surprised, like I was just a few weeks ago when I stepped into this building very first time. Vancouver Police Museum, and director is just waiting for me. Just follow me.
The Via Mia show is sponsored by the following people.
Oh, hi. I'm about to see Robert Noon. Oh, don't worry, I'll find him. Oh, look at this, 1886. I wonder if the building was built then. Robert, Mia Zimmerman, nice seeing you.
Welcome to the museum.
Thank you very much. So are we going to start, because there is so much you can show us. Let's start
Go
with
ahead,
the first
please
pictures.
do.
Yes. So I guess this is the main, this is the entrance, obviously. 1886, that's what caught my attention downstairs.
Yeah, 1886 is really the beginning of Vancouver. In 1886, it was a frontier town being built on the logging industry, but law enforcement was a serious problem and drinking was the biggest problem of all. So there's the first jail in Vancouver. This was actually the courthouse, and there were a couple of cells attached. There were no locks on the doors, because the main reason people were thrown in jail is because they were drunk. So when they woke up the next morning, they were sober enough to open the door and let themselves in.
What an honesty time.
Honesty time. Right?
Yes.
But we still needed a police force. And in fact, this is the beginnings of our police force in Vancouver. 1886, the Vancouver Police Department was formed, and this picture was taken just 2 weeks later, but it was taken because the entire city was burnt to the ground, and City Hall was just a tent.
So that is temporary.
This is very temporary, but here we have the first 4 police officers, Chief John Stewart. Their uniforms were borrowed from the Seattle Police Department. They had no weapons, and their badges were fashioned out of US silver dollars, which they flattened and stamped in Vancouver Police Department.
So when you said they were borrowed from Seattle apartment, what did they wear before?
Well, there were no policemen before. These were the first policemen.
Oh, this is the very first picture?
These are the first ones,
okay.
Yeah. And we talked about the lawlessness and the fire. Whiskey was a big thing in Vancouver, and when the fire broke out, all of the whiskey was thrown into Burrard Inlet, so that it didn't get destroyed. But this poor man, Jackson Arbery, his first job as a constable was to go into the river and capture all the whiskey and bring it back to land. He was very successful, yeah.
That's interesting. So they were saving whiskey. They didn't really care much about people.
Oh, save the whiskey at all costs, yeah.
Well, I really like this building. As a jail, to me, it's a very nice kind of weekend cottage. And this is an interesting story, what you're talking about, the badges.
Sure.
Yeah,
yes.
they're really nice.
There's lots of stories in the museum, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's lots of stories, so why don't we move to the second one?
Another one.
So female officers.
Yeah.
When did they come to the picture?
They came in 1912. The Vancouver Police Department was the first police department in Canada to introduce women police officers. In fact, the second in North America. And 2 women were hired, Lorancy Harris and Minnie Miller, and they became the first police women on streets of Vancouver, primarily looking after problems with prostitution and attacks on women by the men of the time, the drunken men of the time.
Okay.
They became a part of the police force, but they didn't have any uniforms until 1947. And they certainly couldn't carry firearms. In fact, they weren't allowed to touch a firearm until 1964.
Did they have any guns? Did they carry guns?
They carried a gun, but they were required not to carry it in a holster, but they had to keep it in their purse.
So how did they use them?
They had to open their purse and draw the gun, but when you speak to some of the police officers today who remember those days, they captured more criminals by hitting them with their purse than they did with shooting them with a gun.
That's what I was probably thinking.
But in fact, in 1973, the women in the Vancouver Police Department achieved full recognition, and they became equal with men in the right to carry arms, the right to wear a uniform, the right to promotion, and so on. So from 1973, women and men in the Vancouver Police Department had full equality.
Well, I can see the differences in uniform, but you know what is catching my eye? That motorcycle.
It's a 1938 Harley Davidson, one of the early Harley Davidsons used by the Vancouver Police Department. And this is its successor. This is a recently arrived 2006 Harley Davidson.
2006, there's this one, and both can still run, right?
The one at the back will run with a bit of coaxing. This one has been intentionally disabled by taking the pistons out, but if we put the pistons back in, it would run again.
Well, I really like, for some reason, that 1938. It's a beautiful one.
It's a nice bike.
And I remember a long time ago you were mentioning a little bit about the story, but I don't remember exactly the story of the picture. Can you just say what was happening there? I know there is somebody killed lying there. We'll get to that person as well.
Well, the picture is something fairly typical of photographs taken of VPD activity in the 40s and 50s. The VPD wanted to present itself in a very favorable light as far as the public is concerned, so they took every opportunity they could to take photographs of the police in action in a very positive way. In this particular case, there was a criminal who has been shot. He's lying on the sidewalk, and the impression you get is that it was the motorcycle officer who's kneeling over him who gave chase and brought the criminal to ground. But in truth, that's not the case in this picture, because if you look to the right, there's a gentleman in a raincoat, looks very meek and mild. He was actually a detective who had a reputation of being one of the worst shots in the VPD.
And he shot him?
It was actually he who shot the criminal in this instance.
Well, looking at him, I would never say that. So I guess the police officer took pride, and like you said, that people wanted to rather see him chased successfully.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Good pictures of police doing good things with an admiring public in the background.
I wonder if it would be the same case now, these days.
I don't think so.
No, that's what I wonder.
It's just the opposite.
Exactly. And what is the story behind this beautiful item here?
It's the first stoplight used in Vancouver, probably about 1906. What makes it special is that it was not automatic as we have today. It was operated by a police constable, and he used to swivel the light in the appropriate direction according to which lane of traffic he would like to stop or go.
Well, I'm just trying to picture myself behind it, and I would be probably playing around with those cars. So it was, you don't obviously remember where exactly it was taken from, but it was in the whole Vancouver area. This is what was used.
It was.
Early
and in
90s?
all likelihood, it would have been an intersection, a main intersection somewhere in the downtown.
Downtown, yeah.
Maybe Main and Hastings, maybe Granville and Georgia. One of those major intersections.
I wonder if it was traffic that heavy that already needed this.
It was increasingly heavy at that time, but of course there were very few rules of the road. People drove wherever they wanted to go.
I know.
So it was pretty dangerous to drive a car in those days.
This looks to me that these weapons never belonged to police officers.
No, they're not. No.
So I see that they are confiscated. So
No. All of these weapons were seized off the streets of Vancouver by police officers in criminal actions.
all of these.
And they run the gamut from knives to electric tasers to truncheons and whatever.
But when you said they were seized, how were they seized?
Just wrestling criminals to the
Oh my
ground,
gosh.
or the
That's-
criminals were
'cause
arrested,
that
they were
part is-
found in their cars and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
And how would you define, like, what's the difference between which of these are legal or illegal, or how you would?
Well, they're all prohibited in one way or another. If you look at knives, for example, if a knife can be opened with one hand, it's a spring knife, then that's prohibited. If you look at a bear spray, if someone is carrying bear spray in the woods, it's not illegal, but if they're carrying bear spray on the streets of Vancouver, it's
That's illegal.
No
Yeah.
question about it.
Of course.
And any form of these stun guns, these tasers, they're all illegal.
Yeah, you know the knives. Okay, they are bought, but I can see few little items that I can see they're homemade.
Yes.
I'm just wondering what was going through the person's mind to do that, and the time and effort and everything. It's very sad,
It's extremely sad.
you know. And then if I can move here, I want to
Yes,
ask you
please.
something about, because there's huge weapon
Oh.
here. What is this?
This is a baseball bat which was ingeniously modified by a 12-year-old boy, and he took it to school to impress his
12-year-old boy made this.
12-year-old boy took it to high school, and of course it was confiscated.
Of course. Would you be able to say those weapons were used?
I would not venture to say all of them were used, but certainly many of them were used, and they were there to be used if the occasion arose.
Let's just move from this away, because that is pretty sad. So this is definitely self-explanatory, obviously. Footprints, fingerprints, and these red circles. I can see those are the markers. When the line is interrupted. That's what it is.
Each fingerprint is unique. Nobody has the same fingerprint as
Not
anyone
even
else.
twins.
No one, not even twins.
That means there are no twins.
And the main identification methods are to point out the different whorls and arches that you see indicated there. The pattern is never the same in two people.
That's interesting. When you said not even twins, so there's no way that there are two can be even close. And obviously, these red circles, they indicate the identity.
Just different. They don't indicate the identity, but there are different shapes within
loops
fingerprints
and
that
whatever they
people
call it.
They're loops, arches, whorls that experts can identify as being unique to a specific person.
This looked to me more like a workshop.
It is a workshop. We use them when we bring school children here. They undertake crime-solving workshops, anywhere from 3 hours if they come down during the week with the school, or for 3 days if they come here during the summer holidays and we have a CSI camp.
But this is very educational place.
Very much so, yes. And we bring police officers in who go through a simulated crime, a break-in enter or an art theft, and they work with the kids to solve the crime. They take fingerprints, they take tire prints, they check ballistics.
Interesting. So what
yes.
they actually have the police officers help. Do
Absolutely.
they can they manage to solve a crime on their own?
Yes, at
That
the end
happened.
of the whole exercise is at the end of the camp they identify the correct criminal, and usually they do.
It's also fun to them.
Yes, very much so,
Education and fun.
Great fun.
So how often does this happen? You said the camps and
The 3 hour and 1 day camps are going on all the time, but the extended camps, 3-day camps, we do them during spring break, the summer holidays, and the fall break. So geared around the school calendar.
Well, I'm sure that after all these workshops or the camps, there you have some newcomers, the people.
Oh, yes.
Don't the kids tell you one day I'm going to be a police officer?
Yes, and we know many of them that already have joined the VPD.
That is nice.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
you probably were the stepping stone. You never know.
Absolutely. In fact, that's part of what museum's mandate is. we want to help promote careers in law enforcement.
And we're actually getting to the short break, but don't leave us, because you know what's the next place gonna be? It's the morgue.
The VMEA show is sponsored by the following people.
So we are back with Robert Noon, who is director of Vancouver Police Museum. He's been giving us a beautiful tour. We have lots of other things and places to see. Robert, I know this is not a place where many of us have a chance to be or see. What is this?
This is the morgue, the city morgue that was operated from 1932 to about 1980, so about 48 years. And in that time, 20,000 bodies were brought to the morgue for examination as to the cause of their death.
20,000?
20,000.
So, like you said before, when we talked that only unknown, you said unknown cause?
Unknown or unexplained deaths.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
They were brought here so that the coroner's service could examine the bodies and determine the cause of death and bring closure to the families.
So I could see there are 15 refrigerators. That's
Yes.
The whole
15
place
up here, and then we have an overflow morgue in the basement. But that was actually only used twice, both in the 50s, early 60s. Once when the Ironworkers Bridge collapsed, and again when there was an air crash in the Fraser Valley.
And what's happening behind that door now?
Well, behind that door is an office that the kids use.
Office.
Or a desk that the kids use when they're doing the CSI workshop.
Can
you
I
want
see
to see it?
Yes,
Sure.
please. Yeah, it doesn't look that scary.
It's not scary.
No. And okay, this is probably part of the workshop for kids.
It's part of the workshop. These are casts of tool marks that would have been made at a crime scene. And the kids work with police officers and examine these tool marks and try to match them with tool marks taken at the scene.
Whatever
so
tool
that,
was used?
Whatever tool was used, whether it was a screwdriver or a knife or other sharp object.
Oh, okay. Okay, this place looks better when this is closed. So, and the temperature is not like it used to be here, right?
No, it's a bit warmer than it would have been under operating temperatures, but it's still refrigerated.
Yeah, and the bodies from here, they go
into the autopsy suite.
Autopsy place. I wonder if I'm going to feel anything. No, I don't. So, what sort of people are brought here? Or
all sorts of people. People from all walks of life whose deaths were unexplained or accidental, and people wanted to know why they died. But one in particular you might like to hear about is Errol Flynn, the 50s movie star.
The old-time
If you look around the corner here, we have a small display. Errol Flynn was an actor in the late 50s.
I remember the name.
He was visiting Vancouver, and he died rather suddenly, and he was brought here and autopsied to determine the cause of death before being sent down to Hollywood for his funeral.
So he was one of those who was actually right here.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. This is the wall really fascinating me. This is, don't tell me that these are real organs.
These are real organs. These were an educational tool of Glenn MacDonald, the longtime coroner in this building. They are samples of people who have died of both natural causes and suicides, and in some cases homicides. And he used these samples, taking them around to the schools to educate children in anatomy.
Well, I'm just looking, you know, what I was speaking, I don't know, there are so many of them. Normal lungs, smoker lungs. What's the difference of colors?
Well, Glenn MacDonald wanted to show what happens to the body under certain circumstances. So here we have a normal lung versus a lung that has bronchopneumonia or cancer. In other cases, he wanted to show what happens in homicide. Here we have a stab wound to the brain. Here we have a gunshot to the head as a result of suicide. But this is one that you might find interesting.
Okay, sure. I don't
This
really
one
find
here.
anything very interesting, but show me.
Well, this one, the poor unfortunate person died of swallowing their dentures. And if you look very closely, that's a larynx with a set of dentures in them.
Okay, so, and that was the cause of his death?
That was the cause of death, the choked.
And everything looks so neat and just perfect, except that one little hole in that window. I wonder why.
That's right, it's a bullet hole.
I thought that it has a purpose there.
And it's been there since the 80s. The story goes that there was a crime committed and someone was killed. And the body was brought here for autopsy to solve the crime. And somebody didn't want the crime to be solved, so they stationed themselves on a rooftop across the alley. And when the pathologists came to do the autopsy on this table, they took a shot.
So he was supposed to be murdered, so
they
the
were
autopsy
trying to
doesn't
kill
happen.
the pathologist, but the pathologist was not killed, they missed. But we've never replaced the pane of glass.
It's a part of the museum,
Of
you
course.
can't.
It's just another story of the museum.
Of course it is. Sad one. Oh, sad and happy. Happy ending, right?
In that case, yeah.
Solved and unsolved crimes. That's what is in this. Still, all cases open, even if it's unsolved. But this name of the case kind of caught my attention.
This is an interesting case. It dates back to 1965, and it tells the story of a local Vancouver radio personality who killed his wife by feeding her arsenic in milkshakes.
Oh, wow. Oh, can you just briefly? I know it's
Sure.
not easy to
He
say
had a
briefly.
girlfriend whom he wanted to marry, so he wanted to get rid of his wife. So over a period of time, he was feeding her arsenic in her food, and she eventually ended up in hospital, and every day he used to go to hospital and give her a white spot milkshake, but little did anyone know that there was arsenic in there. And eventually she died. After she died, they examined her body, and they found traces of arsenic in her hair, and by carefully dating the hair samples, they could tell there was a dip in arsenic concentration during a period when Rene, the murderer, was doing a movie stunt up on the top of a sign on West Broadway, and he was up there for a week. And that tipped the police off that he was the one who was giving her the arsenic.
Oh, because she
in
was
the
not getting
milkshake.
anything for that
She
1
wasn't
week.
getting any that week. But it was fed to her in a white spot milkshake, hence the name Milkshake Murder.
My God, what a story. Why would people do these things? There is something else, and this one, the reason I wanted to hear about is this is unsolved.
Yes. It's probably one of the most famous unsolved cases in Vancouver, and it concerns the story of two young children who were murdered in Stanley Park in 1947, but their bodies were not found for 6 years. They were found by a park worker who was clearing brush. And what they found was two skulls and some bones, a woman's shoe and the children's lunchbox, and most important, the axe which they believe was used to kill the two children.
Well, of course, after 6 years, they won't be able to probably say much on. There's nothing
Absolutely.
left on it, right?
Exactly. They did try to solve the crime. They called in hundreds and hundreds of witnesses, and they did chase some people. They thought that perhaps the mother was from Quebec, and they did track down some specific individuals, but nothing came of it. And really nothing came of the case until 1998 when the skulls were sent over to UBC to be given DNA tests. And DNAs were relatively new at that time. And what they found was that much of the evidence that they had collected so far was leading them up the wrong path.
So what was the latest conclusion? What did they come to?
The reason they were going up the wrong path, trying to solve the crime, is that when the children were found, it was thought that they were brother and sister. But with the new DNA evidence, it was found that they were, in fact, two boys. In fact, they could possibly have been twin brothers.
And how can they mix the gender, girl and a boy?
Because the skulls of a boy and a girl look very similar.
Well, that was such an experience for me. Well, I guess this would be the farewell. As much as I would like to stay as long as I could, we didn't cover everything. And anybody who would like to visit, you can try by the website, vancouverpolicemuseum.ca, or like we were talking about, this place, it's very easy to be found. Anybody, if not Robert, there is great stuff. I can give you the tour through the places you've seen, even those you haven't, because we didn't have time. There's so much to learn, so much to see. And this would be probably your task as the last one. As like anybody else, we need to have your signature on the VMA Cup in the other season. Well, thank you very much, Robert, for your time. Thank you for everybody's time, and thank you for the attention you gave us in this last half an hour, and we'll see you again next week.